If you guys don't know, two of the biggest real estate developers in the city, residential, certainly commercial, you name it, and so many other areas of civic life in the city as well, you guys are a part of. And they are obviously frequent guests on CNBC and always optimistic, even in dark times. And rightly so, actually, has turned out to be the case. I think many people find it hard to be optimistic about the future of the city right now. And so I guess I'd love to just start with, Scott, where are we in your opinion? You were on recently. I know you were very positive on where things are, and I know Bill as well. But where are we, and what are your expectations as a result of this significant change in the leadership in the city? And Bill, the same question to you, basically.
Yeah, listen, I mean, you all see, right, New York City's back, right? And I think that's interesting. The people that are in New York City, the people that work in New York City, the people that live in New York City, they feel that energy. They have the confidence. They believe in this city, and they have every right to live. I mean, in our businesses right now, we see CEO after CEO committing to this city. We're seeing a record level of leasing in office buildings, and not just for next year. They're leasing for 2028, 2030, 2032. Last week, after the election, there were 42 luxury condominiums sold in New York City, over $4 million, right? So these are not people saying, I'm leaving this city. These are people saying, I'm committed to this city. And the reality is, and why I think this is the case, is that New York is this unique, incredible ecosystem that there's no other place in the country that has a level of diversity, energy, culture, capital. It's just an unbelievable place, and every young professional wants to be in New York. That's where they want to come, where they want to work. And so they're pouring into New York. We have a 1.5% vacancy rate in the residential multifamily market in New York City right now, right? So people want to be here. We had this election, Mamdani comes, and obviously not necessarily consistent with the capital of capitalism.
He's a socialist.
Right.
He's 34 years old. He's never really run anything in his life.
And I would say to you, right.
Got no executive experience whatsoever. Does good social media. Sorry.
I thought you had a question here.
Sorry, comments. I'm just making comments.
And it's fair. No, and it's fair. And what I would say is that's the biggest risk. The biggest risk right now is we have a guy who is a caricature, not a character, a caricature that sets himself up easily to be defined the way you define them. So while I was saying that my point about that everyone in the city that I believes in the city, when you leave the city, when I travel the world, when I talk to other people, they all have this big anxiety about New York. We've lived through 9/11, we lived through COVID, we lived through
the financial crisis,
de Blasio, the financial crisis. This city is resilient. One mayor is not going to take down the city, and we're going to be okay. And frankly, I mean, both Bill and I, we've used every downturn in when people's views of the city to actually double down into the city. Whether it was with COVID, we bought $2 billion of multifamily when people were leaving the city. Office buildings, we just bought 7 million square feet of office buildings over the last 24 months, right? So if there's dislocation, I'll take that opportunity in the capital market side. But I believe in New York, and I don't think one person's going to take it down.
I couldn't agree more. I think the stats will probably hit over 40 million square feet of commercial office leases signed, at the end of this year.
And when was the last time that happened?
I think that was in
like 2 decades ago, almost, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2000, maybe 19, 18. But it's a very strong, diverse. Companies are growing here. We have some vacant space. We've got activity. We haven't seen any diminished. Had a bunch of meetings yesterday, renting meetings with different brokerage firms. All, I keep saying, any impact? He says no. Nobody's put their pencils down. Nobody's calling up the moving trucks, and companies are expanding and taking space because the young people, the people they want to be working in the company are here in New York City, and we have to address the issues that the mayor-elect has brought up. These are legitimate issues. Just we'll try to work together with him and his administration to come up with the right answers, which is what we've always been doing. Initially, he didn't want to have private sector help in housing. He's now talked about it. So it's incumbent upon us to show him the pathway, how to create the housing. We need the housing to continue to attract and retain the employees.
Have you talked to him at all, Bill?
Not since the election. I've talked to him during
Prior to the election,
prior
you
to
did.
the election. But
And what did you find? What was your sense?
my sense was a very smart young man. He was willing to listen and hear feedback on the issues. He's obviously have his point of view, but so far, with the couple of selections, the deputy mayor, first deputy mayor, Dina.
Lena Khan is a part of this administration.
No, she's a part of the transition. She's not part of the administration.
Okay.
So the
Fair point.
The people who he's hired so far is really the deputy mayor, the first deputy mayor, and he's been in that position. So he has experience. He's in his 70s. He was first deputy mayor for Bill de Blasio. He was up in the.
Is that something we should be happy about?
But he knows how government works. He has the experience. So you're saying, Mamdani doesn't have the experience, but he's hopefully going to bring people in the administration who do have experience. If he keeps Jessica Tisch, that's a very strong message. And if she doesn't stay, then hopefully he brings in somebody with a similar type of caliber. He, I think, understands that public safety is a very, very important issue. And that's really the driver of people making decisions of whether they want to come and stay here or move here. We are, like Scott, making investments. We have 2 projects. My children are running our business now, and we have 2 office buildings that, because of COVID and their age, went down to 30 or 40% vacancy. Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul, they passed the city of Yes. They passed tax abatements up in Albany to allow conversions of obsolete office buildings to residential. We're doing 2 projects, one on 52nd and 3rd and one on 40th and Lex. We will create 700 units, and 25% of those will be affordable units. We are leaning in to help this crisis, and I know other developers and Scott are doing their part. And the developers and investors in New York want to invest. New York City came out of COVID much better than every other major city in the country in terms of occupancy and people coming back to work. Tell me, have you guys tried to make a reservation for dinner this week? It's almost impossible to get in a restaurant. Theater is booming. Subway ridership is up. So we have to continue that momentum. Will there be issues that the business community will disagree with the mayor? I'm sure there were, just like every other mayor. But for my family, we care about New York City, and whoever the mayor is, we're going to do our darndest to help support them and give them our advice if they want to listen to our advice. And I know other people like Scott and the business community are going to do the same. There's JP Morgan just opened.
No, it's the most beautiful building. I mean, it's incredible, the headquarters of JP Morgan. It'd be a reason to move to New York for some people if you knew you were going to work in that building, I think, walking by it and looking at it. That said, we've never had a socialist run the center of capitalism. I mean, this is new. And he's going to raise taxes or do his darndest to try to figure out a way to do it. And there is a sense that if you're a business here, you may not leave. Blackstone is not leaving New York, but are you going to hire somewhere else? Is Goldman Sachs going to continue to build in Dallas as opposed to New York? Can you address some of those concerns, and do you share them?
Well, first, I would say, just on the tax, I think it's important to note, right, that New York is different than a lot of other cities in the sense that after the 70s, because of the fiscal challenges, the responsibility for fiscal oversight went to Albany, right? So at the end of the day, the governor ultimately has the veto pen on taxes. And, I met with her for breakfast yesterday. She reiterated there's not going to be income taxes raised under her watch. She reiterated that she's had conversations with the mayor-elect about the police commissioner and the sport. So she knows that she's got to be a firewall.
The buses, she came out publicly that
we can't have free buses. But where you're right, which I'll say, and I've seen already, is that the perception, particularly from the institutional investor, is, there's concern, right? And that, we've seen investors that we were talking to about large investments in New York City pull back to say, I want to see how this plays out. And I think that is where, and then around the world, right? There's, I've been in the Mideast or I've been in Europe, and the first thing people want to talk about is Mamdani.
Well, even in the boardroom of the Federal Reserve downtown, you were a board member of the New York Fed. They want to talk about it as well, right?
Yeah. And they were even talking about how where they're traveling, the staff, when they're around the world, it's Mamdani. Where they want. So it is the flavor of this month that people got to understand what the impact is. So it may chill capital flows relative to equity.
But why did SL Green not even a month ago, commit to buy Park Avenue Tower for a significant amount. They knew who the mayor was going to be.
Yeah,
and
because they're a New Yorker. I'm saying non-New York capital.
Yeah.
I'm saying like people, and again, but my point is, eventually that we'll see what the reality is. And the other thing I'll make the point that's important here is, and what gives me the most comfort is, we have a gubernatorial race in a year, right? So we have a governor that has to serve as that firewall for New York City. And if she doesn't serve as that firewall for New York City, she's not going to be governor in a year. And we'll have a Republican governor who will serve as that firewall for New York City. So if we had to sit 4 years and wait to see how this plays out, I'd have a lot more concern, because I think that the gubernatorial election is going to be
a governor,
a governor a governor on Mamdani.
Yeah.
That's going to be the issue.
What about Trump? I mean, he very well may, the day after Mamdani takes office, choose to make a point of some kind. It could create sort of chaos. He can cut off funds. I mean, it's not an insignificant fear, and not one that necessarily is rooted in non-reality. I mean, he does it other places. Got any thoughts, Bill?
It's definitely a possibility, and we'll have to wait to see what happens. And again, hopefully everybody sort of moderates the rhetoric and moves into the reality that this is an important city, not just for our city and state, but for the country and the world. This is the leader of capitalism. And we're going to have to, everybody's have to adjust to, how they interplay with each other. And we'll, just have to wait and see. I can't tell you what's in the president's mind or what in the mayor-elect's mind, but I do know, I agree with Scott, that the governor has to play a significant role, and the governor has always played a significant role in the operation.
Yeah, there's not that much the mayor can do on their own.
And by the way,
although Lena Khan apparently is looking for opportunities somehow to do that for him on the transition team. We'll see if she's successful.
But just as it relates to the president, at the end of the day, if we have an uptick in crime, I think that we should welcome his involvement in this mix, because we can't afford that in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we need public safety is number one. As Eric Adams used to say, prerequisite for public safety, prerequisite for prosperity. And I think that's right. So, but I do think and I've had this conversation, I think the president, it has an image in New York that's different than what the image is in terms of crime, right? And I think we got to communicate really what's happening to the fact that New York is, the crime is, it's a safe city, the safest big city in the country. But if there's an uptick, he may react.
Yeah.
That may not be the worst thing. Maybe that's another, governor on the situation.
The day after the election, Mamdani made some comments that were a little bit more moderate, and then the president made also comments that were a little bit more moderate.
Although his acceptance speech wasn't particularly conciliatory in any way, Bill.
No, but the next day, I think he thought about it a little bit more and made some comments that were a little bit less inflammatory.
Yeah. What about business? Okay.
Let's go to the videotape.
All right. I know.
There.
Believe me, we would have loved to have had some videotape.
Right.
I'm gonna take questions as well. We're a relatively small group, so feel free to share if you want to raise your hand. I'll just call on you. But back to business. I mean, what are you hearing from other business leaders, Scott, in terms of, you say right now it's occupancy is very high, and I mean we couldn't have imagined it even a few years ago. You and I had this conversation. No. So did we. The A buildings, even the B buildings to a certain extent, if you're not actually converting them into residential. That said, this idea of hiring more people, of adding to the workforce, is that something you think is really going to happen?
Listen, I was saying the bill before, we signed a 300,000 square foot lease with a law firm that's moving in 2029. Last week, they notified us that they need to expand by 200,000 square feet. Right? JP Morgan just moved into that beautiful big building, 10,000 workers. They need another 5 seats for another 5,000 workers already in New York. So, we have a very unique urban ecosystem. And the way you've been talking a lot about AI today at this conference, right? And the way I think about this is, in this era of this transformation to AI and this new growth, there's two things that drive it. There's compute power and there's people power. The compute power is happening in the data centers. The people power are happening in the office buildings in New York. It's where capital formation takes place. It's where transaction activity takes place. It's where creativity takes place. AI as a standalone doesn't add value, it doesn't create revenue to pay the ROEs on all that investment, but putting it in applications where you need domain expertise to be able to have those applications, that's ultimately where you'll drive revenue. And we've seen that pattern every time there's a new innovation in the West Coast. It's the East Coast, it's New York, that takes that innovation and makes it an application that creates revenue. So a lot of the growth we're seeing is being driven by that same phenomenon right now. And I think, clearly, as we go into 26, I think the administration is very focused on heating up the economy into the midterm election. I think there's a backlog on IPOs right now that got held up because of the closing of the government. And so I think we're going to have a very, very strong economy going into at least the first half of 26.
But you raise AI, and I am curious. I mean, all that compute eventually, and we talk about this a lot on air, and this is not specific to New York, this is a general concern, may lead ultimately to a lot of white-collar jobs, at least for some period of time being taken away. It's unclear whether they will be replaced or what they may be replaced with. Do you share that concern at all in terms of at least what it could mean for, let's call it the short term, the next number of years, if in fact this dislocation does take place that many talk about?
Yeah, I think it will definitely happen. I think it's going to happen more on the back office administrative type jobs, where a lot of that are the jobs that are
not here,
not in New York.
Right, they're not in New York.
Right. So those
they're in Dallas, they're in Tampa, they're in other parts of
suburban office buildings. Right. I mean, those are the areas, offshoring. Right. You can automate a lot of that. Right. So I think that will be something that we need to be conscious of. But I think here, what you see is we're already we're sort of the tip of the spear of activating all this new innovation, right, and finding the transaction activity that goes along with it and the revenue opportunities that go along with it.
I mean, you talk about forward committing. So my family, along with Steve Roth and Vernado and Ken Griffin, are going to break ground next year on a 2 million square foot office building at 350 Park, a few blocks away from JP Morgan. JP Morgan's decision back in 2017, when again, people, and through COVID, building that building was a really symbolic, message to, the city and to the country and the world. And so Ken is committed. He'll have more employees at 350 Park Avenue than he will down in his headquarters.
Down in Miami.
Yeah.
I am curious. I mean, you've gotten that assurance from him recently, because that has been a question. We
filed for a building permit. He's a partner in the project, so he is moving ahead, and he's very excited about it. He's been very much involved with the design and the development of the project, and his company's moving out in the first quarter of next year to another building. They're in 350 Park now. They're going to move a couple of blocks west to Fifth Avenue, and that will start the demolition of the building. And
how many years, by the way? When do you think we see that tower?
In 31, 32, something like that. It's a
long way from now.
And we're doing the
several mayors away. How's that?
Right, exactly. And we're doing, we're tearing down the Hyatt Hotel, and we're building a 2.8 million square foot building and have an anchor tenant already that is committing to that for 2031, 32 also.
Who?
I can't tell you.
Oh, you can't tell me?
No. It's not public yet. But my point is, people believe in New York enough. It's a $7 billion project, right? We're financing a $7 billion project. So you don't get that if people don't believe in the future of New York, right? So you got to have a little bit of a longer lens. But I do think, Bill raised it before, and it's just worth noting, which is what's driving Mamdani's success and is the same thing that drove Donald Trump's success, is that we have this disenfranchised part of our economy, of particularly young people who feel like they're not having the same economic opportunity that they thought they'd have, can't afford to rent and live the lifestyle they want to live, and they're frustrated with big business, they're frustrated with government, they're frustrated with the way that things used to be done, and they want an answer. And both the president and now the mayor-elect gave them simple answers, which frankly neither are really executable in the way they are, because it's a complex problem, right? It's hard to build enough housing to bring down the affordability of housing, right? We need to retrain people for what the jobs are that are out there. In the construction industry, we have a 500,000 gap number of people that we need to fill that we don't have people for right now. So that takes time.
Well, here's a great example. So in the last 6 months, the city council and the mayor have passed major rezonings of Jamaica, Long Island City, the Brooklyn waterfront, and Midtown South. So thousands and thousands of units can potentially be built. Just yesterday, they passed the Long Island City one, where Amazon was supposed to go. So it's by 14,000. But the laws that were passed a couple of years ago changed the tax incentives. It was called 421A, that you could build 25% affordable, and then the rest could be market rate, and you got a very generous tax abatement, because that's the economics, call for that. They changed the tax abatement to, it's called now 485X, and nobody's building under it, except if you're if you're 100 units or less, you don't have to fulfill the wage requirements for the construction jobs. And nobody above 100 is building it because the cost is too much. So there has to be a moment where the governor, the mayor, city council, business community, labor have to come together and figure out a way to take advantage of these. The mayor doesn't have to work on the zoning, it's done for him. But in order to get those projects developed, the incentives have to be changed to go to a structure where the project's penciled out.
Is that a realistic expectation?
If they want the housing, we need the housing.
Listen, if you look at what happened in the New Jersey election, in the Virginia election, right? Affordability, affordability, affordability. That's the issue. And the only way you get affordability of housing is build more housing. And I think what we have to try to help educate policymakers is you can't have the everything bagel syndrome, where we want everything to be all union labor. We want all this to be, environmentally totally sustainable. We want there to be all affordable units. You can't build anything, right? And housing
unless the government totally subsidizes the project.
Right, and housing itself has got to be the
but we
challenge.
just elected a socialist who believes in all of those things.
I'm hearing you, but you got to
nothing will get built.
Right, then someone's going to say we're going to have to vote him out of office, right? Because the reality is, if you look, the Minneapolis Fed did this study. They said that if building market rate housing creates affordable housing. Actually, the number was, if you do, for every 100 units you build, the market rate housing creates 70 units of affordable housing. Why? Because people move up. When you build a new home, someone moves into that new home, creates that affordable home. That is what we need to do, is just build as much housing of every type of housing we can,
right,
as anywhere possible, and that will deal with affordability.
There are 40,000, somewhere between 40 and 50,000 apartments that are sitting vacant now in New York City, because again, they changed the law that 2019 that did not
That was
allow,
a state law, right? You basically can't get paid for making the upgrades.
You can't. The apartments need to have their lead removed. You need new wiring. You need new kitchens, new bathrooms. These are 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old apartments that people have lived in their whole lives, and they come back, and they're under rent stabilization, and nobody is making those investments. You could turn on, within 6 months, you can get those apartments back on the market by changing the economics to allow owners to put money back into their apartments.
I asked for questions and we got one, so I don't want to. Yes, sir.
Thanks so much. So let's assume you guys are right that in the medium to long run, New York is fine. My question is, in the short run, do you think we're going to have a little bit of a lull in office leasing over the next 2 or 3 quarters, let's say, where companies just say, you know what, let's just see what this guy does, let's kind of watch and wait. So the question is, in the way your business works, does your pipeline of potential clients have room to kind of sit it out for 6 months or not? I'm curious what you're seeing or hearing.
I'll tell you what I'm saying. It's very interesting. There is such a shortage of high quality office space right now that there's a sense of urgency with tenants, right? So I'll give you an example. I heard a story of a 500,000 square foot tenant, so not a small tenant, that there was 3 of them bidding on the same space. And the landlord said, okay, I'm going to give it to you, but you have 21 days to sign the lease. I mean, this would normally be a year or more to get that lease signed, right, in the normal times, right, because it's a big lease. That's the same, the market, right? So once that psychology starts happening, if you're a company, what you want Your real estate is to acquire the talent. That's what it's there for. Right? It's to house and acquire the talent. I mean, and it's whether you're a tech company or you're a hedge fund, you want that talent. You can't afford not to have that talent, and it's a small part of your P&L. So there's an enormous pipeline on the office side. My whole career, I don't know about you, Bill, I've never seen the market as strong as it is right now in terms of tenant demand. And now it's becoming a sense of urgency, and now it's becoming where for the first time in probably a decade, we have pricing power. Like as landlords, you can actually have not just the face rent, but we're not going to give you as much concessions. We're not going to give you as much free rent, as much TI. So I think it's going to.
So an answer. I mean, so the question was, so you've seen no lull at this point.
I said before, we had meetings with brokers. I actually met with a tenant who's probably a 20,000-foot tenant. They need 40,000 feet. I met the CEO. They came to the building, and they said they need it. They need the space like tomorrow. It's impacting their business. They are so squeezed for space. So they're going to make a deal. Now, does that happen with everybody? Yeah, who knows? But so far, as of today and yesterday, the information that we're getting real time is that the tenants are still in the market and looking for good, high quality space. They need that to attract and retain their employees.
Right, but I do think it may impact institutional, international investors on, that may, particularly on multifamily in New York, because they hear rent freeze and they say, okay, they just hear that word. They don't know it's just rent regulator rent freeze. That is something that the mayor can appoint the people to be on that board. So that may be a pullback. Now, for someone like Bill and myself, that's an opportunity where you can invest through that dislocation, right? That's the objective.
Yeah, it's good for my 83-year-old mother who lives in a rent-stabilized apartment, but why she should be getting a break, I have no idea.
That's a whole other discussion.
By the way, that's really the thing nobody talks about. Exactly. What if you were really to deregulate all of them?
Yeah. No.
How many apartments would that be?
It'd be a lot, but there'd be not
riots, absolute riots.
It wouldn't be a good situation.
Bunch of 80-year-olds out in the street.
Look, people who need. I think the governor talked about this in terms of the buses. There's already a program for people who can't afford to ride the bus.
Right, fair fares.
The fair fares. So that needs to be expanded for the people who really need the help. But and same in rent stabilized apartments. There are people in there who can afford to pay a lot more, but they're gaming the system, unfortunately. But that's the way it is.
Everybody rides the bus for free anyway. Yeah. Sean?
Thanks so much for doing this. It's great to hear you so optimistic about New York City. There is a movement on the left called YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard. Came out of Seattle and San Francisco. In your conversations with him, did he ever mention YIMBY? Because I never hear YIMBY out of him. I hear social housing. Government's going to build it. There's no problem too big that government can't solve, and there's no problem too small that government shouldn't care about.
Yeah. But I think that's and when he first started running, no private sector in housing. He's moved off of that. The devil's in the detail of what happens. I think, again, just go back in history. When Ed Koch, I don't know if everybody knows who Ed Koch was, but he was a...
It's a bridge.
He was a
bridge.
Yeah,
Ed Koch bridge.
He was the mayor.
He was the mayor after the city was coming out of bankruptcy. 76. But he was a very, very, and the word back then wasn't progressive. He was a very liberal, village congressman. And as soon as he got into office, he realized that he needed to move to the center and get things done to help promote the city and create opportunities and jobs. And hopefully Mayor-elect Mamdani understands that he needs to manage and operate a $116 billion budget, which, by the way, we were talking about before, when Mike Bloomberg left office, it was $60 billion.
Isn't that incredible?
So,
thank you, Bill de Blasio. But
yeah. So,
but I met with him for an hour and alone, and he came in prepared. He came in already pivoting from the campaign to the governing mentality, and said all the right things. Again, the proof's going to be in the pudding as to what.
This was recently?
This was in September.
It was before the election. Okay.
But in his mind, he was winning the election. In my mind, frankly, he was already winning the election too, right? So But it was that kind of conversation. And he said he realizes that he needs to lean into public-private partnerships. That's the only way that they're going to be able to build the type of housing, do what needs to be done. He didn't bring up YIMBY. I brought up things like that as to explain what he was going to need to navigate through. But I want to contrast that though, because when I met with Bill de Blasio, I don't remember if you were there, Bill, but I had a 12-person session with Bill de Blasio right after he won the primary. And he looked around the table of all his business people, and he looked and said, "None of you elected me, and I'm not here to serve you." Right? That was the first meeting, right? So when I think about that, and we lived 8 years with this, and from that moment on, by the way, everyone realized you're not going to get anything done with him for 8 years. The good news is he went to the gym, and some of his people started to do stuff for us, right? But this guy at least starts with saying, I know I need business people to work with if I'm going to be successful.
But he also, in his acceptance speech, he said, we got to deal with the big bloated bureaucracy. And he's talked about that before in terms of the Board of Ed and other
327,000 employees. In the city of New York.
So, and we have been telling him and his people that you want to pay for some of these things. Look at the budget. Look. Focus on the budget. The same with the state. You want to pay for childcare. Look within your own budget and come up with the money. And he again, it's on the tape. He did say the big bloated bureaucracy. So let's hope he focuses on that and comes up with
the Koch idea. All right, we're already tight on time. We want to let everybody start eating their dinner, but let's get to another question quickly.
Thank you. Stephen Holt from Orchard Global. You mentioned earlier on there's about 40 million square feet of leasing record levels. I'm curious, how much of that is in the so-called Plaza District, and how much of that is outside in the kind of outer avenues? And I'm also curious if you have any comments about commercial level real estate, retail level real estate in the city.
Well, I don't know the exact statistic about in the plaza and the Grand Central, but I would say a majority of it is there. That's the tightest market in the city. I think it's below 10%.
It's like Grand Central, Rock Center, and Midtown South, I say, with the three big pockets where there's the most level of activity. And then retail, I mean, again, we've seen very strong retail activity in the city. I mean, we had any retail that we had that was vacant, we've leased, at higher rents than we anticipated. And this, and one of the benefits, Bill mentioned this, and I know we're running out of time here, about this conversions, is you're creating these walkable 15-minute live, work, play communities in pockets of Midtown Manhattan like we have in Lower Manhattan. So where a restaurant would only be busy 5 days a week because that's where you have only office buildings, now they have people that live there, so they're open 7 days a week. Same with the retailers. So it's really changing the complexion of New York, and I think it's for the better long term.
I think also on terms of retail, there were particularly restaurants. There's so many new restaurants that have opened up in the city, and they took advantage of the COVID drop down in rents, and they were able to get good deals. And you walk along, there's still vacancies, of course there are, but not that they were not to the same level as they were, 3 or 4 years ago. So, and you feel that vibrancy, on the street, and it's exhilarating. I think.
I feel so much better now after our 30 minutes. It's not going to be a frightening hellscape that we're walking through here.
Enjoy your dinner.
Yeah, no, everybody enjoy your dinner. But guys, really, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Both of Bill Rubin, Scott Reckler. Thank you.